Let's face it, folks. Wednesday was a tough day for President Biden on the economic front. The man was hoping for at least a little relief from the Federal Reserve this year, a hint that those painfully high interest rates might start inching back down before voters head to the polls in November. But Jay Powell, the Fed chair, swatted away those hopes like a nagging gnat. Powell didn't mince words. The Fed's mission to wrangle inflation down to a nice, tidy 2% is nowhere near complete. The economy is still running too hot to even think about loosening monetary policy. Those high borrowing costs that have been giving the American people heartburn? They're sticking around, at least until after the presidential election. It's an uncomfortable predicament for both Biden and Powell. The U.S. economy is purring along quite nicely, outperforming other advanced nations and operating close to full employment. But that very strength is precisely why the Fed feels compelled to keep rates higher than voters or the president would prefer. The Federal Open Market Committee admitted as much in its latest statement. Despite their best efforts over recent months, they've made little meaningful progress toward hitting that elusive 2% inflation target. Read between the lines, and it's clear rate cuts in June are off the table. Heck, even July is looking doubtful if you parse Powell's remarks about needing more time for rates to do their job. So the world's most powerful central bank finds itself in an awkward spot as Biden and Trump gear up for their electoral showdown. Cut rates too close to November, and it could be seen as politically motivated helping hand Biden's re-election bid. Keep rates elevated, and Trump supporters will inevitably cry foul, claiming it's a calculated move to undermine the economy under his successor. To his credit, Powell was emphatic that politics will not sway the Fed's decision-making. A September rate cut is still theoretically possible, though most analysts view that timing is too fraught, coming right between two presidential debates when the public is hyper-attuned to anything that could sway the outcome. No, more likely we'll be heading into this knife-fight election season with the benchmark federal funds rate parked in the lofty 5.25 to 5.5% range, a 23-year peak. That means mortgage rates, auto loans, credit card interest, they'll all remain painfully elevated too. Not exactly an ideal scenario for Biden as he tries to convince Americans that the economy is in ruder health now than under Trump's stewardship. The fact that the Fed has been compelled to leave rates higher for longer is a stark reminder that inflation has been an irksome thorn in Biden's side for nearly his entire first term. Whether it's food, energy, housing, the fundamentals of life, as Powell put it, families have been getting nickel-and-dimed by relentlessly rising prices. Sure, Powell tried putting a brave face on things, insisting he's not giving up on orchestrating that fabled soft landing, guiding inflation back to 2% without tanking the economy or sparking rampant job losses. And he pointed to the steady influx of immigrant workers as a ray of hope for easing price pressures this year. But it was hard not to detect a resigned tone as Powell conceded he's unsure whether the projected cooling in rental costs and other sectors will be sufficient to enable rate cuts in 2024. We're going to have to let the data lead us on that, he said, a far cry from the Fed's previous bullish forecasts that envisioned a soft landing as the most likely path. To Biden's credit, the news from the Fed could have been worse. A spate of higher-than-expected inflation readings had sparked speculation that another rate hike might be coming. Powell tamped down those concerns, asserting that further increases are unlikely unless something dramatic changes. Still, for an administration that staked much of its political capital on wrestling inflation under control, Wednesday's sobering messages represented a disheartening reality check. Yes, the U.S. economy is more vibrant than its global counterparts, something Powell was quick to highlight as a potential bright spot for anyone in the White House who was listening. But the vigor of that very economy is also the main culprit keeping the Fed from loosening the very fiscal shackles that could meaningfully boost Biden's political fortunes ahead of his re-election bid. It's an exquisite conundrum with no easy solutions in sight. So Biden and his team are left to ponder an economic landscape where the strength they've worked so hard to nurture is now the biggest impediment to their political aspirations. The Fed made its stance crystal clear this week: stable prices take priority over any ephemeral electoral considerations. For the president, that means girding for a long, hot summer of economic discontent as voters decide whether the benefits of a booming job market outweigh the pain of punishingly high interest rates.